Well, good morning, everyone. So we're going to be talking today about compassionate problem solving, and it's kind of an interesting title because what does that mean, right? What does it mean for problem solving to actually be compassionate? Compassion means to suffer with. So a way that you can think about this is going into a problem with this idea that this is a we problem. Your problem is also my problem, and I care about you. And how do we communicate that in a way that helps us actually problem solve and create change? So most of us do actually have these kind of conflict styles. And a lot of that comes from our history. The way that we grew up in our family system, a lot of families will fight with each other and then get over it right away, and it feels good, but nothing ever really changes. Or sometimes people have a more avoidant conflict style and they kind of stuff things under the rug and they don't want to talk. And again, nothing ever really gets resolved. And so, what we're going to be looking at today is not just how to do this compassionately, but how to do it successfully. And we're going to talk about the different styles. And so I encourage you to kind of look for how you can make what might be your kind of go-to style, and then we'll look at how to do this most successfully. Okay, um, so what causes us to actually need to problem solve? A couple of things. Either there's going to be some kind of distress that's caused by somebody else's behavior. We don't have control over other people ever, and so we have to negotiate our needs for our needs. Or there's going to be some kind of situation that is affecting your life that's going to cause you to want to problem solve. Problem solving is it's going to show up, or our problems in a sense are going to show up in two primary places. It's going to show up, and this is research based, in our jobs or in our most intimate relationships. Okay, if it's showing up at work, these are some of the ways that it shows up. Inconsistent performance. You might have an issue with a coworker, or you're showing up late to work. A boss is talking to you about mistakes that are being made and it's actually costing them money. There might be integrity issues or broken commitments where you're agreeing to something, your words aren't matching your behavior, kind of a thing, or any kind of customer service type of problem. Or it's going to show up in family and relationship problems. It doesn't mean the problems don't show up in other areas too. This is just where we see them the most. So family and relationship problems, you might have parenting issues. Maybe you guys have different values. You and your partner, maybe an unwillingness to share or communicate. You might be asking for help or asking for change and the person's just not responding. Integrity issues again, maybe there's been some kind of an affair or might be just broken commitments. Scheduling and availability issues have to do with just how much time you're willing to put into the relationship. Intimacy issues, differences in sexual need, that kind of thing. Financial issues, or problem solving styles. Okay, so people have typically three ways they go about solving a problem: silence, fighting, or actually addressing the behavior and requesting change. So a way that you can think about this is silence is passive, fighting is aggressive, and addressing the behavior is assertive. Okay. And this is where we're actually requesting the change that we want and that we're looking to actually solve the problem. Silence and fighting are actually related. A lot of times one will lead to the other. If people get into a huge fight, then a lot of times they'll pull away, right? A lot of times, if somebody is stuffing something under the rug, then it swings to the other polarity and they get into a big fight. It finally all comes out. Okay. All right, so let's look at a little bit closer at these. What silence looks like. So it might seem obvious, but actually it can show up in a variety of ways. Of course, it's avoiding addressing the problem. And what people are actually doing here is they're avoiding an uncomfortable feeling that they have, and they just don't want to lean into it or address it because there's some sort of distress inside. And typically, one of the things that's going on is there's this kind of minimizing happening where you're telling yourself, like, it's no big deal. I'm just going to let it go. And it just kind of gets stuffed. But it can also look like what we're seeing in this picture, which is what we call stonewalling, where silence is almost used kind of as a punishment, or I'm just not going to talk to you about this at all. And you figure out what's going on with me, or what's wrong. We can tend to think that silence has certain advantages. And so I just want to ask you guys, if anything comes up in your experience, what might you or anybody else think would be the value of just keeping silent about something? And feel free to mute yourself, or you can put something in the chat. Does anything come up?
This is Julie Johnson. For me, it was the time to pause and reflect.
Yeah, okay. That's actually really healthy, and we'll talk about that. That can be a really valuable thing to do, as long as you do actually talk later. Yeah, but good. Yeah, go ahead.
For me, I bottle up my stress all the time. I never address problems. Sometimes I just hope they go away, and I rarely deal with them
Yeah, yeah.
because I try to be a peacemaker.
Yes, you're not alone. So one of the things that you're saying is that you're thinking an advantage of it is that it just keeps the peace, right? Yeah. Anybody else?
Yep, so we had some in the comments. Some people said avoid to fight. Some people said, yep, take a step back and make sure you aren't overreacting.
Yes.
Multiple people said they feel like their words are more dangerous than helpful.
Yes.
Just trying to avoid conflict. So kind of a lot of the same in different ways.
Yes, no, that's really good. And a lot of times people have, and again, you can see how this can relate to people's history. A lot of times people will think they really don't even have a right? That I don't have a right to bring this up. So those are, really good shares. So one thing we also tend to think it avoids a hassle, right? Well, I don't want to get into it. Perhaps it'll go away if I just stay quiet. It's going to take less energy right now. But what would be some of the disadvantages of it? What's been your experience that if you stay quiet, some of the downsides of that? What actually happens?
Some people said unresolved anger, the problem doesn't go away.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The issues fester and cause resentment and avoidance.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah. Silence also is communicating acceptance that the person's behavior is okay, right? So if somebody shows up late for you, a half an hour late every time you try to get together with them and you never say anything, then your behavior is saying, your silence is saying that's okay, right? And then it encourages more of the same. It's going to leave you feeling powerless and helpless. Like, I can't really address this and negotiate my own needs. And then it can lead to future fights. We get that pendulum swing that happens. Okay. So fighting, we all think we know what fighting looks like it looks like this picture, but actually there's a lot of ways that fighting can show up. It's almost always going to involve criticism of the other person, which can even involve verbal abuse. So it's a rejection of the actual individual. You're being critical of them rather than talking about their behavior. It can look like demands or dominance or trying to get control over somebody, like when someone says you can't leave the house, or I don't want you seeing your family, things like that. It could also look like passive aggressive behavior, which might look like I'm really mad at you and I'm going to hide your keys and you're not going to be able to get to work today and things like that. It's passive, but it's also quite aggressive, right? It can look like sarcastic attacks, like, oh, I was just kidding, right? And you weren't kidding. Or, of course, in its worst form, it would look like physical abuse. What do people think of as being the advantages? It's really about power. It's a temporary feeling of power that I really mean business, and I'm putting you down, I'm putting you in your place. I'm going to override you. And, you know, my voice is going to be the louder one and that kind of thing. What are the disadvantages of fighting? What, in your experience or just observing this, what has been, what are the disadvantages of getting into a fight with someone? Any thoughts? What actually happens? What comes out of this?
Sadness, loss of a relationship, emotionally exhausting, fights that cannot truly be won, and separation.
Exactly. That's really well said. What all of you guys are sharing is there's this underlying the trust gets just kind of begins to dissolve over time with a lot of fighting. It just really affects the trust in the relationship. And the reason for that is it's communicating rejection of the other person. Okay. It's not, you're not pointing out a behavior problem. You're rejecting the person. It's kind of this, let me educate you about you kind of a thing. You're this way and this way and this way, that kind of thing. And it damages the relationship, which you all were talking about. It impairs trust. And it makes, for these reasons, it makes future problem solving more difficult because people don't trust each other. What you're going to see is that when people problem solve well, you have to bring in a certain vulnerability. You have to, because it's what engages the other person's care for you. It's what causes them to join with you and make it a we problem. Is they see your vulnerability and everyone recognizes it and they go, oh, you know, I care about you. And so I want to join with you in fixing this. And if you're impairing trust over time, it makes it very hard for that vulnerability piece to come in. Okay, so what does actually addressing the behavior look like? So if we're doing that more assertive communicating and addressing it, what's it going to look like? So we're going to be focusing on the problem behavior, not the traits of the person. So, and we're going to be using healthy communication, and I'm going to be talking more about this. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot. Healthy communication is the use of I statements, and I'm sure you're all familiar, have heard of that and familiar with it. But a way we can think about this kind of generally is kind of like what I was saying before about instead of kind of doing this, what's our natural go-to, which is this kind of, you know what, let me educate you about you. Because if I can just get you to see what you're doing over there and you fix that, I'm going to be okay. But it doesn't change anything because people feel hurt by that and they get defensive and they shut down, and it doesn't change the behavior. Really, what we're wanting, the shift we want to make kind of in your thinking is, let me educate you about me. I'm going to share with you what is happening, what you're doing over there, and how it's impacting me, and maybe even what I'm aware of in terms of the why. And we'll talk more about this. It's going to be calm, but with purpose. And there's always going to be, on the other person's side, a compassionate willingness to listen. So wanting to understand the other person's experience. Okay, so addressing the behavior and why we want to do this, okay? It's going to be the best likelihood of success. Longer lasting behavior change, we're going to see, we actually will see behavior change. It communicates acceptance and worth of the other person, the person that you're talking to. And it actually builds trust. It's building trust. And then because of that, it's making problem solving easier the next time. People, it feels really healthy and empowering. And you know this because I know just about everyone, given the right conditions or maybe the right person, has been able to solve a problem with someone, and it feels really healthy, right? It feels, people feel really good about themselves. They feel good about their partnership. It's like, hey, look what we did together, right? It feels really good. Reasons that people avoid it is probably the number one reason people avoid it is the risk of rejection and that it feels vulnerable. It takes courage to do this, but if you lean into it, you get better at it. It does require some new habits, and we're going to talk about that. It's one of the things we do all the time. I do a lot of marriage and family work for Blomquist Hale, and one of the number one things people come in requesting help with is communication, how to communicate more effectively with each other. And we help walk you through those steps and how to do that. I'm going to do that with you today. It does require some skill and patience and some energy. You have to want to do this. That's why people end up coming into therapy for it, is because they want to invest the time. Okay. So here are the steps. If you were to come in, these are the kinds of things any of us would be going over with you. We're going to talk about a soft startup because this is research-based. What we know from research is that how a conversation or a fight or whatever it might be starts is typically how it ends. And so if people start with fighting or raised voices, it will end with raised voices. If people start with a calm demeanor and a soft voice, it'll end that way. And so it's good to ask for a time to sit down. So you have, like somebody said earlier on, so a little bit of time to reflect on what is it that I want to say, and then purposely going into it as not this is a confrontation, but that this is a conversation. And if this is a conversation, I want to just go in with heart and a soft voice and kind of this soft startup, okay? Explaining the behavior you want to address sounds really obvious. It's not, because a lot of times what happens is people get really overwhelmed by their feeling experience, and they don't even know, like, what is it, what's the actual behavior in the other person that is setting off this experience. I know I'm really mad, but maybe I just feel kind of this global overwhelm, right? So you want to get clear on what the behavior is, and then you end up showing, you show how you share how you end up feeling when this person exhibits his behavior. And you can add what you know about yourself that makes this difficult for you. And so what I mean by that is, let me give you an example. Like, let's say that a couple is just got married, and this partner, let's say this is a man and a woman, and the woman's brother comes over for dinner, and her new husband and brother kind of join together in teasing her, and they think it's fun, and they're just goofing around. And she gets really hurt by that. She might want to share with her husband, when you kind of join with my brother and you guys are teasing me this way, I end up feeling hurt. But I might also want to share with him that I have a history of having grown up with some bullying where friends did that to me, and I was the one that was pushed out. And help my partner understand why something that might look pretty benign to them and kind of fun and silly doesn't feel that way on my end. But you can also see how this makes me feel vulnerable, right? That I'm sharing these kinds of things. But it's this kind of sharing of that vulnerability that causes the other person to feel like, oh, wow, okay, I really don't want to do that, right? Then you want to be sharing what you're hoping for instead. What is your need? What I'm needing is that when my brother comes over, I want to feel like you're joining with me, that that you would have my back. I just want to have that feeling experience, that I don't want to feel like you're joining with somebody else against me, right? And sometimes it's interesting. Research shows, the research of John Gottman, and some of you might be really familiar with him. He's done over 30 years of research in long-term, what keeps long-term couples together. And he talks about that there's some kind of dream that people have when there's conflict, there's some kind of dream they have for the relationship. So her dream might be that, I finally have a partner, right? I have a partner. I've got someone in my camp that we always have each other's back, that I feel safe, that I'm able to feel safe with you. Okay. So I might share what I'm needing is, for you to drop that behavior and to feel like, I know you're there for me. Okay. You also want to be willing to listen compassionately to the other person's point of view. So when we're listening compassionately, we want to kind of drop our own viewpoint. That we typically kind of listen in a way that we're listening for what's wrong about what the other person's saying so that we can correct it. In therapy, we ask people to listen for what is right about what they're saying and to own what is right about what that person is saying. And then you can always bring in, hey, can I share what's happening on my end too, so I can give you a fuller picture. Okay. Then you may want to negotiate behavior change. So let's say this husband says to his new wife, oh yeah, totally, I would never want you to have that experience. And yeah, I'm completely on board. I'm not sure what to talk to your brother about. I think that's one of the things that why we get into doing that is that I'm not sure, we don't have all that much in common. And she might say, you know what, I know he loves baseball. Why don't you guys talk about baseball or something like that? So they're negotiating, right? Behavior change, what that might be able to look like. And then this last one is something that people typically forget to do, and it's really powerful, is so you set up a plan, and it might just be, okay, this is what's going to happen next time he he comes over, but it's also follow up. So it might be, hey, after my brother comes over next time, can we sit down and can I share some of my experience with you? Then it's kind of top of mind for everybody. It's that follow up makes it more, puts it more in the foreground. Okay. Okay. So you know what? Let me pause. Let's go back here for a second and see if you guys have any questions or thoughts, anything you want to comment on with any of that, and then we'll keep going. I know I gave you a lot. Everybody good?
Looks like everyone's good.
Great. Okay. So, all right, let's talk a little bit more about I statements. So,
Hey, Carlin,
yes.
one person said, yeah, it just feels overwhelming, like I will never figure this out.
Oh, I so get it. And you know what? I really encourage you because I'm giving you a lot of information right now. And so it kind of can feel, I totally understand why that person would feel overwhelmed. I would really encourage you to come in. That this is exactly what our service is for, is and let a therapist go through some of this with you using examples from your own life, or if you want to come in by yourself, or come in and with a partner, and we actually work on, we'll take certain content issues and the therapist will guide you through talking to each other this way, and you get to practice it. And it can make a huge difference, and it can also all of a sudden make it feel very simple and doable. Okay. I'm just giving you like the whole picture at once. And so I understand how it might feel that way. I would say just listen and get kind of a general feeling today of like, oh, okay, this is what this might feel like. And if you want more specifics, come in and let us help you, because we absolutely can. And it's not a long-term process. We can do this in short-term therapy and have it work well for you where you feel like, yeah, I can do this. Okay. I statements, the reason that we're wanting to use those statements about, let me educate you about me rather than about you. These statements are kind and compassionate. They're also vulnerable, like we were talking about, and that vulnerability is going to be what engages the listener. Okay. It's because they care. All right, so how do we use the specific I statements? And I was talking about this in the steps. It's just I statements are actually really, really simple. It's when you're naming the specific behavior that the other person does. I feel, so when that behavior occurs, this is how I feel. And what I'm needing is, and this is what I'm needing that's different, and then what I'm wanting to change. Some people add to the I statements, and really it's optional, is sharing the consequence of a person's behavior to you. It's, let's say something like, when you come home at the end of the day and you don't ask me how my day was, I feel hurt. I feel like you don't really care. I feel sort of minimized, like I'm not all that important to you. And what I want to see, what I'm needing actually is just when you come home, yeah, just ask me how my day was. We don't have to get into anything huge or long. If I were to add what the consequence was, I might say, when this happens, when you don't ask me about my day, I notice that I tend to start pulling away, and then I don't ask you about your day, and it just creates distance between us. Okay. But really all we're looking for is that when you do this behavior, I feel, and what I'm needing is Just those three things. Okay, let's do an example together. So let's say you request that your partner gets home by 6 o'clock and to make dinner for the children so you can focus on studying for an exam the next day. And they agree to that. And this is a big exam and you're nervous about it, okay? Your partner gets home at 7 instead. The children are hungry, they're getting fussy, you're unable to focus, and your partner says, something came up. So how could you respond using I statements? So let's look at this together, okay? So I have here first, what is the behavior you're wanting to see change? But you know what? Let's look at the second one first, because a lot of times what's most accessible to us is how we feel. Okay, so let's think for a minute that when this person comes in, that they say, your partner says, something came up, but just go downstairs, study. I've got it from here. I'm going to take care of everything. Just go downstairs. So let's say you make an agreement to do that, but then when you go downstairs to study, you're thinking, okay, we really need to sit down and talk about this, and I want to do that. So I know that I'm going to want to bring this up and ask to talk about it. The picture is showing you that we want to reflect first, and she's got to study first before anything. But typically, the idea here is we want to reflect first on what's actually going on so we can get that I statement in the forefront of our mind. You don't have to say the I statement exactly. If I just have it in the forefront of my mind, it'll come out naturally, okay? And it doesn't have to be perfect. But if we say, okay, we're reflecting on this, and how do you imagine she might feel? How is she feeling? Anything you can throw out. And you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat, whatever you like.
So people are saying not valued, uncared about, frustrated and let down, unimportant, ignored.
Perfect. That's really great. And what I really want to point out is that everybody came up with feeling words and feeling experiences. Like it says here, you did really good, because a lot of times we tend to say, oh, I feel like, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just part of our languaging that we'll do that. And it can actually be helpful, but you want to say, okay, when I feel like this, what's the actual feeling? What am I actually feeling? And you guys did that great. Okay, so feel minimized, heard, unimportant. What is the behavior that she's wanting to see change? Might be a couple of things.
Communication, negotiation.
Okay, that's good. So think about, there's a behavior that this partner did that caused her to feel minimized and hurt, maybe angry, maybe anxious, right? A number of things. What's the actual behavior that that person did? Is there anything else that comes up? Okay, so
he broke his promise, and so that destroys trust.
yes, okay, broke his promise. So, and that promise being, right, I'm going to be home at 6. It might be also the behavior of going, yeah, something came up, right? Not, yeah, like, oh, well, type of thing, right? Yeah, so it could be both of those behaviors that were hurtful. What would you imagine you needing instead? Just stay with the need. What I need instead is what?
Somebody said an apology, a new solution, validation of how it affected you.
All those are great. Yeah, yeah. And I, when you tell me you'll be home at 6, and you know that there's something really important that, yeah, that you'll make every effort to get home for me. Yeah. Okay. So it might look like something like this. When you say you'll come home at a certain time and then you show up an hour later and say something came up, what I'm noticing is I feel angry and I feel hurt. I feel abandoned. The support that I thought that I had wasn't there. And I even felt sort of panicked because I need the time to focus. And I want to feel that we're a partnership. So in the future, when you give me your word, I'm hoping that you'll follow through so that I know I can count on you. Right? Yeah. And if I'm saying something about the, oh, something came up, maybe I would say something like, and that maybe you can share more with me about what came up so I can better understand what happened here. Okay. Yeah, so any questions that you have about some of this? And I want you to know that, people have said, clients have said to me before, oh, you make this sound easy. Well, of course, I've been doing this for over 30 years. It takes practice. It does not take 30 years of practice. I absolutely promise you that. And it does take practice. And you can absolutely get good at this and get to a place where it comes pretty naturally. But it does take some stepping back and some reflection and learning a new skill. So what kind of questions might you have, or any comments, or just anything I can be of help with?
Yeah, so
Yes.
oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
So I've just got one. So I think, looking at some of these scenarios,
Mhm.
wondering if there's a difference between going through this experience, this situation, and having this kind of dialogue and communication, whatnot, the first time something happens, versus if you have a reoccurring problem.
Yeah.
So for in the example we just gave there, let's say this happens and you go through and you have the dialogue that we just described and whatnot, and then the next day, let's say they get home late at 7 again.
Yes.
So repeat offenses and whatnot. Do the steps change, or what do you do the next time the thing happens that you've gone through the process on?
That's a really, really good question. And it's not necessarily that the actual steps change. You're probably going to be talking about it more as there's a reoccurring theme here. And the way I want to talk to you about it as the way this reoccurring theme happens, and in the way that impacts me when it happens over and over again, because it's going to impact you in a different kind of way, right? It's probably going to build resentment, or a lack of trust, right? And so the person really needs to understand how the repetitive behavior the impact the repetitive behavior is having on the relationship itself. So that's one thing. Then, you know, in John Gottman's work that I was talking to you about before, and if you're interested in his work, a really great book that he wrote is The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. It's really, really well researched, and if you have an interest in that, it would be well worth looking at. But one of the things he talks about is that there are solvable problems in long-term relationships, and there are chronic problems in long-term relationships. And the chronic problems are oftentimes problems that follow the couple all the way through their relationship. And he will talk about how we have to find ways to work with that they're harder to solve. And so it might be that if if you're coming home late all the time and I've got a huge exam tomorrow, I am not going to ask you to watch the kids. Maybe I ask my parents to come over and take care of the kids that night and I go to the library because see, my partner has ADHD and they have a problem with time and they can't, and I've lost trust around that, you know. But that book has more in there about that as well that is interesting. I don't know if does that help?
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering, maybe the deeper question is a repeating problem, can a repeating problem be a harder thing to resolve than a first-time problem?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because it begins to affect the relationship overall. And a lot of times repeating problems create a dynamic in the relationship. And what I mean by dynamic is that when it repeats a lot of times, somebody else will have a particular, will begin to develop a particular response to that. And then it kind of gets circular. Whatever the response is affects the other person in a particular way, and same on the other end. And you kind of get these circular dysfunctional patterns. And where those are happening, therapy can be really helpful. Couples counseling can be really helpful where there's a dynamic occurring. You need somebody to help you get out of it, is what I'm saying. And yeah, they are harder. I want to say too that people will not change it because either they literally can't change, that they just for whatever reason, maybe they have some kind of trauma that makes it really hard for them to step forward on something, or like I said, there's neurodiverse brain functioning in some way or that kind of thing. They want to change, but they can't. Or a lack of change can also mean the person doesn't care the way you want them to. That they aren't able to join you around that problem. There's just not enough care there to want to do it differently. And yeah, if those things that's just feedback for you and things you want to check out. You know, how invested are you in the relationship? Is this where you want to be, kind of a thing?
Awesome.
Yeah.
That answers a few questions. There was a few people asking if it's, you follow these steps and it keeps happening for years, what do you do?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just talking about. That, yeah, if it's happening for years, what I would suggest is getting into therapy first and seeing if you can have a therapist help you work through that dynamic. Because you're not, whatever's happening, it's not getting resolved. And so you want somebody to help you figure out why that is, what's actually going on that's keeping it stuck, the problem stuck.
Okay, and someone said, okay, how do you respond if the other person is not receptive to having a calm, appropriate conversation about concerns?
So you mean that they don't want to sit down with you calmly and talk it through? So
Yeah, probably. Like
Yeah.
they're probably meaning they try to do it and it's not happening. Like they just kind of explode over it.
that's really hard. Again, that's where I would suggest therapy, because you have somebody who's going to monitor all that. And I would ask them if they'd be willing to go to therapy with you. So you have somebody that can help with the reactivity. And that's a big part of what we do is we manage the reactivity that happens between couples so that we can actually work something through.
This one's a good one. They said, how do you show / have compassion towards someone that you don't necessarily have that love and care for? So not a spouse or a loved one.
Okay, that's a really good question. So it again, I would have you look at, what do you value that's bringing you to sit down, that's causing you to want to sit down with that person or even be willing to sit down with that person and talk to them. Yeah, and can you open yourself up, even if you don't like someone? Can you open yourself up to their experience and listen and seek to understand? It's like, can that be my intention, that I want to understand you, that I want to listen to you and understand you? That is the compassion. And what makes something compassionate is assuming innocence on the part of the other person instead of guilt. Now, you may think that they're guilty of something, but can you suspend that? Can I be willing to say to myself that there's some way that this person is seeing this or experiencing this situation that is causing them to feel like it's, their behavior is valid, and can I open myself up to their experience and just listen and try to understand them?
Okay, this one's a good one too. So they said, how do you distinguish between not being able to change and not caring enough to change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think you have to, that's not something that you're going to figure out by yourself. You have to really talk to the person about, you have to talk to them and you have to ask them questions about, you can say, my experience is that you don't care about me, or you don't, you're not invested in our relationship. Is that true? We do not want to ask questions. We want to say kind of what it is. And then, so we kind of throw out these things and say, you don't care about me, or you don't care about this relationship. You're not invested in it, kind of a thing. And we kind of throw these out and then, step back and wait and see what happens. Rather than asking the question, is that true? What is true for you? And yeah, it's not something that you want to be trying to figure out by yourself. You need to ask. Yeah. Or do you really feel like you're not capable of making change around this? Tell me what your experience is. I want to understand you. Why is that? Is there a way we can get some help on this? Or are you not invested in the relationship? Yeah.
Okay. And these questions are great, guys, so you can keep them coming. We still have some time, so if you have more, you can send them. So this one says, how can you help an avoidant partner feel like they can be vulnerable with you? How do you thread that needle of enough space but not too much?
Okay, so read it to me again.
Yeah. How can you help an avoidant partner feel that they can be vulnerable with you? How do you
Okay.
find that needle of enough space, but not too much?
Yeah, so the reason I wanted you to read it again is that if this person may be talking about attachment styles, and that, yeah, that maybe this this is a person with an avoidant attachment style. And um, always the most important thing is going to be the trust. It's just building trust. And when I say building trust, you can think of it as creating a safe space, a safe environment for this person, that you are safe, that you are a safe person, that when you have issues with them, that you talk about it in terms of their behavior, not in terms of them being critical of them in a particular way. So I want you to feel safe. I want you to and I want to build and protect the trust that we have between us.
Okay, and then do you have any advice on how to talk to somebody? Okay, sorry, let me start over. Do you have any advice on how to talk to a spouse about couples therapy who may be very resistant to it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You know, one of the things you could do is you can get on the phone together. When you, let's say you're calling Blomquist Hale, you could get on the phone together and you could ask um, our client advocates that answer the phones really know a lot of the therapists very well and can make recommendations. You can ask your partner, would they feel more comfortable with a male or a female? And honestly, you guys, it doesn't matter at all that, you know, we're all trained to not take sides, but sometimes people feel a little bit safer if they, you know, they are able to choose a gender that they feel a little bit safer with. You can always ask for our bios and go over the bios together with your partner and choose somebody together. You can even say that, hey, why don't we go in together once, and you know, we'll check in and decide together afterward whether or not we want to do this, and we can go also see the person each individually after the first joint session, kind of a thing. Any of those things, you just want the person to feel safe as best you can. Yeah, it's, you know, that is a completely valid question, because a lot of times partners get really scared. A lot of times they get scared when they know that they have an issue that they've been maybe kind of projecting onto you or onto somebody else or whatever it might be. And they feel like, oh, you know, if I go to counseling, somebody's going to call me out. Yeah, so sometimes people are resistant to going, but hopefully they'll see the value in it as a, you know, something that can really help the relationship, help you get out of kind of these stuck places.
Okay, and then the next one is, how do you deal with someone who stonewalls?
Oh, that's a really good, yeah, really good question. We talk a lot about stonewalling in therapy. So one of the things you can do is you can get that book I told you about. John Gottman talks about there actually being 4 things that cause people to cause their relationships the greatest distress and cause relationships to come apart. And those 4 things are criticism of the person, criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. You don't usually see contempt until things get really bad. And that's just, contempt is just like, ugh, you know, eye rolling, I can't even be bothered with you, kind of a thing. But stonewalling is one of the key things that will pull a relationship apart. And so you can try to help educate, you know, you can share that information with them. The thing that we teach in therapy about stonewalling is that what is often happening, what's actually happening, is that the prefrontal cortex of the person that is stonewalling, where they're shutting down and not talking, maybe for days on end, gets flooded, and initially gets flooded, and their brain just goes offline, and they feel like they can't express themselves clearly, so they just shut down and stop talking, and just go away. And then, of course, the problem never gets resolved. What we talk about in therapy is that it's okay when that happens to call a timeout, to say to your partner, I'm getting flooded and I need to, can we just time out? I need time to just pull back from this. And you're wanting to get the distress down. And but the key part of doing that, so that your partner doesn't feel abandoned, knows something's going to happen and come out of that, is you have to be willing to put forward a time that you're going to come back and actually talk about it. So if you're a stonewaller and you say, hey, time out, I'm getting flooded, can we come back at, it's 9 o'clock now, can we come back at 11 and just sit down and talk about this? I just need some time away and I need some time to calm down. And that works really well. Sometimes it takes therapy to kind of help with that process, or you can try to educate somebody about it, like I said.
Okay, we have a few more. Hopefully we can get to them. Okay, if I don't get to your question, you can always email it to me and Charlene can answer it. So
Absolutely, I'm happy to.
Someone said, is it better or worse if most new things seem to get resolved quickly and easily, and the majority of conflict arises from old or reoccurring issues?
Okay, can you say, I missed some of your words when you were first talking.
So it says, is it better or worse if most new things seems to get resolved quickly and easily, and the majority of the conflict arises from old reoccurring issues?
Well, I wouldn't say it's better or worse. If you have old reoccurring issues, I really encourage therapy. I just think therapy can be so helpful to these reoccurring pieces, because they're reoccurring because there's some way that you're getting stuck, right? And if you're actually resolving some things, well, I think that's great. And there may be a piece of kind of what I was saying before, how in John Gottman's work, he talks about there being these long-term issues that will sometimes follow a couple through the course of their relationship. There may be some of that that's going on too, that you just have to work with and work around. But if there's issues that are really causing a lot of distress, or where you think there's a dynamic happening, you really want to come in and get some help with that so that we can help you get unstuck.
Okay, and I have 3 more questions in the comments. So if you haven't already put your question, just email it to me and then we'll have Charlene do it, and I'll finish up with these 3 because we're out of time. So the next one is, how do you keep the other person from going extreme on the fix, in quotation? Like if the problem is around parenting, you give an example of what needs to change and the other person says, I'll just never discipline them again. So it's at the point where they are no longer helpful to the fix.
Oh, yeah. They're just they're hearing, somebody is hearing that as a criticism of them. If they're saying, I'll just never discipline again, rather than hearing it as a behavior problem. But parenting is tricky because sometimes it has to do with, how I was saying there's a dream underlying a conflict. that's often really true in with parenting that people have because of their own history. They have certain things that um, they really want to see happen or not happen. Um, and so they get very attached to their point of view, and it's they kind of go after the other person of you need to change this particular behavior. They're really attached to it. If the other person is hearing it as you're not a good parent, which is often the case, again, it can be really helpful to get an outsider helping with, hey, this is what effective parenting is actually going to look like. So it's not coming from you, like you're the better parent and somebody else has a particular parenting, not just that they have a parenting issue, but that they're experiencing it as I'm not okay. Right, where they're kind of shutting down and saying, okay, I'll just never discipline again, kind of a thing. But obviously, if they're disciplining in a way that is hurtful, you're right, that's not okay, right? And you might need some help to get that person to actually hear that.
See, is arguing in a relationship inevitable? How to approach a disagreement when one partner has a dominant argument style and the other one shuts down, in quotations, during disagreements?
Yeah, that's that's that fighting piece that we were talking about, that at the very beginning of the presentation, that some people feel like the way they make their point is to dominate, and it's just not going to be helpful. It's not going to be what resolves the situation. Yeah, so I'm not sure I got to the actual question on that, Heather. Wait,
Let me go back to it.
yeah,
How do they approach a disagreement when that happens?
approach a disagreement. Yeah. I would just say, you know what? This isn't effective right now. The way you're speaking to me is causing me to feel afraid, and it's causing me to shut down. And I don't believe that we're going to be able to get to a place where we're able to resolve the actual issue. And if that is a person's actual problem solving style, that is going to need therapy.
All right, last question. My partner and I go, well, it's more of a comment, but maybe I'll have to
Okay.
correct her. My partner and I go to couples therapy, but she feels like it's me and the therapist ganging up on her. I feel like I can't be honest in therapy now.
Yeah, if you feel if you or anybody feels like there's an alliance with the therapist, then it's probably better to just switch therapists. I don't think anybody intends for that to happen, but sometimes it can be people's experience. And if it's the experience of one person, then you can see what happens. This person just shared what happens is I don't feel I can, because the trust is lost again, right? That person, the person that just shared that, doesn't feel safe in that situation. So you probably need to make a change. And that's okay. It's always okay to make a change. That, yeah, people are all well-meaning, including therapists are really well-meaning in these kinds of situations. And sometimes these kinds of things happen or it doesn't work. And yeah, I just really encourage a change.